So the good news is that that eliminates 4 items off of our agenda this afternoon, and lets us spend at least this first hour, 45 minutes, on what is properly identified as the first item for us to be discussing today, which is our Council Resolutions 144 and 145, which are the payment in lieu of taxes agreement associated with the Roslyn Rise 4 and Roslyn Rise 9 projects, and the Apfo exemption that is being requested in tandem with those 2 resolutions. I can list off the very many people that we have joining us today, but they do include at least 3 and perhaps eventually 4 members from our Board of Education. Board of Education Chair, Dr. Wu, also Vicki Cotronio, Christina Delmat-Smalls, and perhaps later, or maybe already, Antonia Watts. We have many representatives from the school system, including Scott Washington, Dan Lubley, Herb Savier, Tim Rogers, and Nisa Dennis, Patrick Saunderson, and Justin Fitzgerald. And we should have with us Director of Housing Community Development, Director Kelly Semino, from the Enterprise Community Development, Brian McLaughlin, Jess Newbelt, Mackenzie Keisel, Tom Cole representing Enterprise, and then Daniel Kelleher from Community Homes Housing, and a number of other community representatives and advocates. I'm not sure. Yep, Mrs. Herod.
If we can, we do have some representatives in the audience here in the Banneker room. So if you're here to participate for the Apfo pilot, if you want to come up and find a seat at one of the tables. And just please try to spread out to one of the chairs.
Chair Walker, we have school staff come to help you as well if you have any questions related to school.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Wu.
Leading by Mr. Washington.
Okay, all right, perfect. All right, is there a council member who'd like to take a lead on this? Ms. Young, I thought you might say that. All right, please go ahead, Ms. Young.
All right, thank you. I don't know if any of the educators are here in the audience. No, they're only online. All right. Okay. So I'd like to start with asking some questions of the panel of people who are here from the Howard County Public School System, and I'm not sure who the best person is to answer some of these questions, but I'll just throw them out there, and whoever is comfortable asking or responding to those questions, I would ask that you go ahead and respond. So my first question is, Bryant Woods has a high farms rate of 49.2%. It also has a large special needs population of 11.5%. It's a Title I school. Please, if somebody on the HCPSS panel could explain the special capacity considerations that go into a low-income school.
This is Vicki Cotronio. I can start it off.
Thank you.
Bryant Woods was in my cluster last year, and so I had an opportunity to be in the school quite often and saw firsthand the great work that they do, first of all, but the lack of space, because when you are a Title I school, you inherently are offering more services, which is more staff, more pullouts, and the special education component of it really makes that a big need with all of the pullouts. You've got reading intervention, math supports, Title I coordinators, English language supports if needed, alt ed paraeducators. So there's a lot of people, and I literally saw, social workers working with students on the stage for lack of space. This school has, since 2011, has increased in enrollment by 100 students. And with that, more and more need and more, it has become very clear that there is a a significant lack of space. And in fact, the facilities were assessed back in 2008 by Gilbert and Associates, and it cited Bryant Woods as having a significant shortage of educational space for special education and for other areas. So it is at a significant disadvantage. And I hope that we can take those sorts of things aren't always considered when we're looking at capacity, as the number of staff and the number of services. And so I think it's really, really important to elevate that. So thank you for asking.
And when was that study that you just mentioned, and who did the study?
It's 2008, and actually they had 100 fewer students when they did the study, but they went around and assessed all of our schools to rate them and to help us prioritize our what projects we tackled first. And so they look at the educational specifications of what you need, the square feet that you need to deliver special education, to deliver all sorts of services. So Bryant Woods was low on that, with having adequate space for special education and for some other things I can't really remember off the top of my head. But the classroom, just not having enough classroom space, not having enough space. In fact, when I was there last year, the students couldn't even get their wheelchair into the classroom because of the way that it was angled. So it's an old school. It was renovated, I think, in 2004, but it has small hallways. It is, it is back straight out of the 70s, honestly. Wonderful school, but they do struggle with space and being able to provide services and all of the supports that these students need.
Thank you.
I can send it to you.
I would love to see that report. Yes, I think that would be useful.
I'll try to cut it down with just Bryant Woods, because it's about a 20,000 page report.
Okay, no, that would be a lot, Ms. Katrina. But yes.
Ms. Young, I just want to make I want to make a comment as well.
Yes, Dr. Wu?
Go ahead, Dr. Wu.
Okay, thank you. I think this comes to the question we need to ask ourselves. What's our vision for Columbia, right? We complain about the concentrated poverty in Columbia schools. Now we even concentrate more, right? Then what's our solution to address the issue when next time we talk about school and poverty level or anything related to that? And if we're doing this practice, what's the solution we're going to face, right? And are we making the problem worse, or are we making the problem better? I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves, or ask you or the county zoning board.
Thank you. Chair Walsh, I have some more questions if we can keep going.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Does anybody on the panel have the answer to the question of how many special educators there are at Bryant Woods?
And I think
I have the list of all the staff. There's a lot, but I don't know how much that is different than other schools. But there's just, in addition to the special educators, there's alt ed, there's Title I coordinators, there's math intervention, there's reading intervention, Title I family involvement contact. I mean, there's a lot of staff in the building. In addition to special ed, there's probably, I think, 6 or 7. So if someone else wants to chime in.
Okay, Ms. Caternio, how you doing? Scott Washington, Chief Operating Officer here. Mr. Justin Fitzgerald, he's in the attendees list. If I could bring him over, he's the area performance manager. He should be able to give some more specific details about that school if he can be brought over from the attendees list. Justin, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Good afternoon, everybody. To answer the specific question about special ed staff, so to narrow it down, they have 3 ALS classrooms and they have 3 special education resource teachers. So if you're bringing it down to specifics, that would be a total of 6. There's a lot of other support positions, but 3 ALS classroom teachers, 3 special education resource teachers.
Thank you. And actually, Ms. Quaternio was starting to go where I was going to go next. I was wondering how many how many ESAW teachers are used for ESAW instruction delivery?
With ESOL, if you give me one moment, I can find that out. Just 1 second. I pulled the special education staffing. My apologies. I believe it looks like one full-time ESOL teacher on the staffing sheet I'm looking at right now.
And how many classrooms are needed for pullouts for either special ed or special instruction? And Ms. Quaternio, you mentioned also students who I guess get pulled out for other types of activities. I'm not sure what all those activities are. How many classrooms are needed, or rooms, and are those rooms sufficient at Bryant Woods right now?
I confirmed with the administration at Bryant Woods this morning, so that they have, of those 3 ALS classrooms, each have their own full-size classroom that they're working from. The 3 resource teachers all share one room amongst the 3 of them. Then when they're working with students, they have a schedule that they'll use that room sometimes, but then they'll use the pull-out areas outside the grade levels and the pod areas, or also use empty classrooms that are available, so that they've developed their own schedule that works based on the space that they have. And in the words of the administration at Bryant Woods, it works very well for them.
What is the capacity right now at Bryant Woods, and what is the student population?
Okay, so in terms of where the projected enrollment started at the beginning of the year, they're below it at this current time. I believe there's something that shows 130% is their capacity where they are right now, over capacity. They're working less than that with their actual enrollment, so that when looking at the space that they have, some of the questions I believe that were sent in an email were regarding portables, if they needed more portables. Assistant principals have come back and said that they actually have space for everybody and wouldn't need actually anything to add to it. I just joined, so I'm not sure if you had talked about some of the other community projects that were going on in the area, but they were explaining that there's a community housing area across the street that people have been able, it's being taken down at this current moment. They're having to relocate to other parts of the county. So that's one of the reasons why some of the enrollment has gone down for that. In terms of
Can I stop you there for a second? Are you, so there's something across the road that the students are going to now, that something that's closed down that the students are going to help deal with the overcapacity of the school?
No, it's community housing across the street that is in the process of being taken down. And I don't know the specifics about the timelines. I do know that that's where the families who've been living in those areas are given other options where to live in the county. And so some have already gone and pursued those opportunities. And
so the people who are living at Roslyn Rise, I assume, I'm looking at the Roslyn, yes, okay. Some have started to relocate, and that has meant that there's less, there were fewer students in Roslyn Rise or in Bryant Woods as a result of the fact that these families have started to relocate this year?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And Ms. Young, this is Tim Rogers from Office of School Planning. I would just add to what Mr. Fitzgerald just mentioned, that the capacity of the school is 361. Able to, in recent years, place several relocatable classrooms there as well to act as temporary capacity when the enrollment was, as Mr. Fitzgerald indicated, at a higher level than it is currently.
How many trailers are located at Bryant Woods right now?
I believe we're at 6.
That's a
Double
lot.
checking.
Yeah, and I
6.
think that's the limit. I think that was the last, we really pushed to get that last portable last year or the year before, because they were pretty much at a crisis point with their enrollment. But I think that I was told that the property can handle no more portables.
Yeah, Ms. Catronio is correct. I think additional portables on that site would impact ball fields or parking or some other critical space.
So what activities take place in the 6 trailers that are located at Bryant Woods? Are classrooms located there? Or is that where they go for band, for art?
So they do have classrooms that are using the portables. In terms of the,
Do you know what grades are out there?
I'll need to confirm that for you. I go back to the question about the enrollment for a moment. You asked what the figures are. The projected was 368 for the beginning of the year, and they're at 305 right now. Okay. And then to answer the question about where, for example, our instrumental students at Bryant Woods work, they do have a small room that they're able to use when they're doing small groups. Works real well for the small groups. When they go to the larger groups, that's where they end up on the stage that they have there. And this is a practice that's been in place for a while. And again, it's not disruptive. The administrative team has explained that everybody's very used to how it works, and it's not a problem, so to speak, in terms of having a larger group works listed.
I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a reverberation in this room, so it's sometimes hard to hear. So who goes onto the stage? And who goes onto the stage when it's not disruptive? Was it the band that goes onto the stage and it's not disruptive?
Yeah, so when they do small group instrumental, the small groups for the
and they do this
instrumental,
during the time when the kids are eating in the cafeteria?
there could be some overlapping with that, but the way they've been able to accommodate the students who are doing the instruments up on the stage, as well as those who are eating their lunch, it is not a disruption to them.
Not disruptive. Okay. All right. Ms. Soar, could you bring up the first, I think it will be the first chart that we ask to be displayed, not that one. It's nice to be able to see over your shoulder here. I think that is, what is that one labeled? Yeah, that one. Thanks.
Control room, can you? Thank you.
All right. I am not totally sure who is here to speak on Roslyn on behalf of Enterprise. There's okay. I have, yes.
Sorry, Jess Newbelt, Development Manager.
Okay, Jess, you can see the chart up here. And as you can see, The existing units at Roslyn Rise are 58. The planned units are 153. That's an increase of 95 units, which is a 264% increase. And by far and away the highest increase of all the units. Ranley has an increase of 185%, Waverly Winds, Rideout Heath, I don't want to skip that, 182%, Waverly Winds, 161%, Fall River Terrace, 214%, for a total of the 200% increase. So that's the first part of this chart. And then the next part of this chart are the school assignments. Roslyn Rise, Bryant Woods, Wildlake Middle, Wildlake High School, and these are the capacity limits that are listed for these 3 schools. And this is the utilization rate. As you can see, 136.6% is the utilization rate for Bryant Woods, and the farms rate is 57.1%. And as you can see, the utilization rate for 2024-25 is also predicted to be not over capacity at Wildlake Middle School. Yes, by 2033, but that's pretty far up. With farms rates of 46.58% at Wildlake Middle and 47.4% at Wildlake High School. And then we set out in this chart the other 5 developments that Enterprise owns and I guess at various points in time plan on developing. And as you can see, other than Rideout Heath, which is also slated to go to Bryant Woods, there are 3 potential developments for Enterprise that would go to schools that are not over capacity. So Waverly Winds will go right now to Swansfield, Harper's Choice, Wild Lake, and Swansfield is at 91.7% utilization in 2024-25. And then we have Fall River Terrace, which would be assigned to Longfellow, and its utilization is 95.5% in 24-25. And then we have Ranley, which also would be slated to go to Longfellow with a 95.9% utilization rate. Of course, every single one of these schools have very high farms rates. If you can go down a little bit, then you see that these are the size of the properties. And the first one, Roslyn Rise, is 3.5 acres, which is about average, I guess, for the 5 properties. There's Waverly Winds at 3.7, Rideout Heath at 5.76, the largest of all the properties, which would also be assigned to Bryant Woods. And Fall River Terrace at 2.84 and Ranley at about 2 acres. Can we go to the next page? There's not a second page on that chart? No. Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. So my question here is, there's 3 developments that you could have chosen to go to schools that have capacity for more kids to come to those schools. And yet the development that was chosen was the one that would send that school into a spiral of overcapacity. Why was that? Did you consider the school capacity at all when you were making this, when Enterprise was making this decision?
Councilmember Young, this is Mackenzie Kissel with Enterprise Community Development. Am I being heard well? Okay, good, my mic's on. Thank you for the question. So Enterprise Community Development has, well, we purchased these properties in 2017, and we've been planning their redevelopment ever since. So we've essentially been planning Roslyn Rise, its redevelopment since 2017. Our first application, I believe, went in early 2018 for tax credits. So this was a while ago. I won't pretend that I actually remember what the school capacity tests looked like at that time, but I do know that we did take a look, and I will say that, you know, there has been redistricting since we started this process, and I would imagine that that did impact the school capacity. So yes, it is a very good question. We have taken a look at that. The reason that we've gone with Roslyn Rise here is we really feel that this is the best location for us to lead with. We're doing something that hasn't been done much. It hasn't been done all that much across the country, but it hasn't been done much here in Columbia either, which is to do a true mixed income community. And we felt that the most important thing for us to do was to really look at the location to set the right tone for all of these redevelopments. And in this case, Roslyn Rise is really the missing tooth, I would say, between downtown Columbia and the rest of Wild Lake. It's transit connected. It's walkable. It's a really excellent location, especially as compared to some of our other properties. And so I think our feeling was that this is the one to really set the tone with.
So aren't all of your properties basically within walking distance? I mean, I've walked within walking distance, having, you know, knocked on doors. They're all within walking distance of each other. They're all very close to transit, to food, to grocery stores, to schools. There's not a single one of them that doesn't fit that description.
That's a fair assessment. Our feeling was still that this is really this is the one that's closest to downtown Columbia and all of the redevelopment that's happening there, close to what's happened in Wild Lake Village Center, and that was part of the driver. The second driver, which I forgot to mention, is that we also took a look at deferred maintenance, and none of these properties are falling down for sure. There's no life safety issues, but this was one where we felt it needed attention sooner rather than later, and some of the other properties are perhaps a little bit above it on that. So, Jess, anything to add on that?
So, to your knowledge, then, Enterprise never really looked at any of those school overcrowding issues in downtown Columbia?
No, sorry, go ahead, please.
I think what Mackenzie was suggesting before is that when we started this process, it was prior to the redistricting efforts that occurred in 2018, 19, 20, 2020, and have now gone into effect, which effectively pulled a lot of the downtown Columbia development into the Bryant Woods Elementary School. And when we began this process, that had not yet occurred. So the density charts looked a little bit different then. So, it is something we look at, but it's one of a large number of factors that we take into consideration as we're planning our developments.
So when you take this into consideration, do you also take into consideration and Ms. Sawyer, can you pull up the next chart? Do you also take into consideration the free and reduced meals rate at these schools? I think it's that one.
So I will say that whenever we do a redevelopment, we definitely look at free and reduced meals rates at our area schools. I can't say that I remember a specific conversation on this, but I do know that that is something that we always take a look at.
That one. So if you could take a look at this chart, this is everything in red are the Title I schools. You can see where they are located in Howard County. And obviously, the biggest red piece here on one side of 29 is in the Wild Lake area, which is where Bryant Woods is located, Longfellow, Swansfield, Harper's Choice Middle, Wild Lake High School, and where this plan would double the number of students at the smallest school with the smallest capacity. And you can see that the farms rates at these schools are between 41 and 64%, and they're all Title I elementary schools. So I just want to, I think this is important for everybody to be thinking about when these projects are coming up. I asked a question about what it's like for students who are living in households with high poverty rates of the superintendent last Monday, a week ago. And this is what Dr. Martirano said. I would highly discourage you from making any exemptions to any of these decisions that are going to place further impacts on our schools that have the greatest need. It may appear to be benign at first, but when we are looking at those exemptions in the total amount, it creates a concern for us. One, capacity in terms of enrollment at a school that is already highly enrolled. Two, there is also the additional need for services that you already articulated, Councilmember Young. It creates challenges for a school that already has additional needs. We have tried to approach all of this in a very artful way, but we do not want anything that would, as we try to solve one problem, create more challenges for us by adding more students through the exemption process. So what's your reaction to that? It doesn't matter. We're still going to seek the Apfo exemption. It's, we're overcrowding the school is just the way it goes.
I think that I would point to two things, and maybe Jess can help and jump in here so that I don't get the number wrong. But number one, we are adding market rate and workforce housing to this redevelopment. And I believe that the number of farms, potential farms, households it's very small. Jess, do you have the exact number?
Of the 95 units we're adding, only 8 of those will be at incomes that are at or below typical farms rates, which are about 45% of area median income. Like Mackenzie said, 52 of those units will be market rate units, 55 will be one bedrooms. So
52 out of 150.
52 out of the 95 additional units will be fully market rate, and I believe it's 27 will be 80% of area median income, which is a high moderate income. So they're restricted at that level, but it's not a very deep poverty sort of level. So I think what Mackenzie was getting to there is that this project, we do take the farms rates in the school seriously. One of the driving reasons behind going to a mixed income approach here is, among other things, that it would help to deconcentrate poverty in this housing community, but also in the schools here. So by adding the market rate households, we're reducing the concentration of very low income families and students in the schools.
You're not replacing the low income. I thought that anybody who lived there right now who is low income would be able to move back into that specific.
That is correct.
Apartment complex. Well, now it's not. Now it's a townhome complex. You're making it into an apartment complex.
Correct.
Yes. So all 58 households have the opportunity to return. Some of those households have chosen permanent relocation. The vast majority we expect to return to the property knowing that they'll still be lower income. So of the 153 units, 101 of them will still be affordable at various levels. It's just 52 of the additional units will be market rate.
So it's not half and half. I'm sorry, because I thought at one point it was 50% market rate and 50% not. No, it's 100 low income and moderate income, and it is 52 market rate. Am I right?
Correct.
And Councilmember Young, may I add one thing?
Sure.
And in addition to some of the things that Jess mentioned about the current community and really needing to improve it for the current residents, one of the things that we're doing, but also want to do better, is that we have wraparound services, particularly focused on the students at the community. So we have a provider, Community Services Foundation, who does after-school programming at the site. Right now they are in a unit, so it's not a great space for them, and it somewhat limits their capacity as to how many students they can actually take in and impact. At the new redevelopment, we will have a much larger homework and sort of summertime space for all of our children. And one of the things that we'll be doing is to ensure that these students have success at school.
Ms. Young, I'm going to stop you there. I know that we lose Dr. Wu shortly. I was hoping, and that's why we invited them and the school system to perhaps share their thoughts on how best to address this. Before us is an APFO exemption. I know once we lose any board members who are time limited, I would definitely like to hear from Enterprise about what measures and efforts they undertook to avoid having to seek this exemption. But while we still have the four members who have so graciously joined us this afternoon, I would like to give them the opportunity to share with us their thoughts on this proposal as it has been put forward before the council, and perhaps solutions or alternatives that would work more in concert with what we're trying to do across the whole school system and specific to downtown Columbia. I would even like to hear, all of you were involved in the last redistricting, so to the extent that did or did not affect enrollment projections at Bryant Woods, that also would be interesting. But Dr. Wu, I know you mentioned your short time, so I would like to give you some time here to share your thoughts.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Walsh. Thank you, Congress Young, Councilmember Young. So I think I have several thoughts. The first one, I would say, in general, in the past, we have a problem predicting the student number from apartment, and in general, that number is low. So that's our experience before. I want to mention that because when we talk about numbers here, I want to make sure the number we see from that data sheet probably is undercount. Just give you that idea. That's my first question. I think second comment is, I talked about it earlier. What's our vision for ourselves for Columbia, right? How do we really say, when we talk about it, say we concentrate property in some schools, at the same time, we're not address that problem. We're make the problem worse, right? I think in terms of the affordable housing, I think we need to spread out, and then it's easier to manage, both for the school, in terms of the resources, in terms of teacher, and you heard about it from Dr. Martin as well. I think we talked about this a long time ago when I was on CA board. We talked about this concern for the community and for the school. I don't want we repeat the same mistake of the before. I hope you can spread out a little bit and then make sure and the school has the capacity there, both in terms of capacity for students and the capacity to support our students. So both of them very important in order to help our students grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members?
I have something to say, but I'll let, and then Ms. Delmont-Small hasn't spoken yet.
Please go ahead, Ms. Delmont-Small.
Thank you. I think what we have to always remember is that APFO is supposed to ensure that we have capacity and capacity for learning. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how does this exemption benefit the students of Bryant Woods? And how does it benefit the students who will come from this particular development. Because the nature of the system and the fact that we don't have capacity where we need capacity, it won't only affect the students from this particular school, it will affect other students as well. So that's, to me, the question that we have to ask, because as my colleagues have said, there are increased needs for these students, and we want to make sure that every student has what they need when they come into our classrooms. But as the superintendent said, we don't want to trade one problem for a different problem.
I wanted to speak about the redistricting. It really didn't provide any relief, and it might be related to what Dr. Wu said. It's really hard to predict apartments, and I've just heard that if families have relocated, and so that's impacted the number too. But we moved kids around, and downtown Columbia now goes to Bryant Woods, and I think it didn't provide much relief at all. I love the fact that this is a redevelopment and it's mixed income, and perhaps teachers and public safety workers can afford to live here, but it comes down to numbers. And Bryant Woods had 100 student growth within a decade, and I think it's just one of those schools that has attracts families and high numbers of students. And so, to have students who are already facing challenges and living in poverty then have to go to an overcrowded school where resources are stretched and not being in a healthy learning environment. That's where I struggle with these exemptions, because it's saying it's okay for these students to be in an overcrowded school, and if anything, they need to not be in an overcrowded school. So I love the idea of this. I think that I hope we redevelop more communities in downtown Columbia, especially over the Oakland Mills area. I think that it's right for that. But my concern is the increasing the density of this project on a school that once this comes back, we're going to be back where we were. The number is low now. It's still high for a small, older school. But I think we'll be right back where we are with the projections. I think this is a little blip with COVID, and then the fact that they don't have these living quarters temporarily, I think is impacting that. So I think it's a great project, but I've heard from the Bryant Woods community, it is very crowded. They do a wonderful job. I mean, like Mr. Fitzgerald said, they make it work, and but they shouldn't have to. And I wanted to speak, they do have 6 portables, and that's the max that they can have. And I believe the whole 3rd grade class is in the portable. Thank you.
Ms. Watts, did you want to add anything?
Sure, I'll add a couple things. I think that the housing itself, the redevelopment of the housing is great, and it's a great thing for our students actually to live in updated housing. And I do share the same. And actually, one of my questions would be is how is the farms rate going to be impacted with the addition of this housing? So, if I understand correctly, 55 of the households had the opportunity to return, but the units for affordable housing varies 101 units. So I just don't know how that mix will actually change, and if it will impact the farms rate actually at Bryant Woods. I don't know if that's something that could be answered.
Is it okay for us to address the
yeah,
number?
that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to see if we have someone from Enterprise. Is that you?
Yes, this is just speaking.
Okay, yep, go ahead.
So it's sort of hard to follow the numbers, but so it's currently a 58 unit property. Almost all of those people are expected all of the current residents are expected to return. So, in general, all of the current students would likely continue on in their current schools. The 55 number that you mentioned, that's the number of new market rate units. And so in general, we don't think we're adding, we think there's maybe a max of 7 households that will be added that are at or below the farms level. The vast majority of students, I think it's 87 of the 95 new households will be above the farms rate. So in all, we will be improving the the mix of farm students versus higher income students at the school. And we will be, as Mackenzie mentioned, providing those additional services in an expanded way at the new development once we open.
Thank you, Ms. Newholt.
Hope that answered your question.
That does, thank you. I don't know if we, from a school system, actually could tell the number that the percentage of farms would decrease from 57% down to what number. It doesn't sound like it would take Bryant Woods out of Title I status. And I think I shared some of my colleagues' concerns is that the going over 136% capacity is concerning. We are running out of space, and I think it could force us into, it could actually force the school system's hand a little bit in terms of what we'd have to do to alleviate that extra capacity at Bryant Woods. So that is a concern I share with the rest of my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, so that was actually my question, Ms. Watts. So the thing that would have forced the board's hand is what, to redistrict? Is that, I mean, what else can be done if you have a school like this that's this out of whack with even the surrounding elementary schools? And one other solution, again, I'm not on the board, I'm just looking at what's been done historically, is I did pull up the attendance, the school year boundaries for our elementary schools. And I know of some because they're in my district or close to my district, but I can find pockets where, for example, on Chatham Road, we send those babies to Centennial Lane Elementary School, even though they're surrounded by a sea of another attendance area. Thunder Hill, I think, also has this kind of isolated island of attendees. And there was a third, Duckett's Lane has one, Duckett's Lane Elementary. Is there the possibility that the school system could say, okay, this enclosure, this Roslyn Rise neighborhood is not going to go to what you would expect looking at an area attendance map? It's not going to go to Bryant Woods at 136 and worse. It's going to go to instead some alternative. Are these possibilities? This again is where what is the alternative to getting an AFO exemption and jamming more kids into a school that's going to be grossly over capacity for the foreseeable future?
Chair Walsh, I just hang on a little bit. I think there are not so many solutions facing us, right? So think about if we move the student far away to some really far away school, even they have a capacity, that means much longer on the road, and the student will not be able to get involved with after school activity or before school activity, right? They may need to pay extra before care and after care, right? Then think about the other solution is really, some schools don't have a place for portables at all, right? So you have limited space there. And the third solution, you do redistricting. But I think just really we need to remember for every council member, overall, our capacity in elementary school, middle school, and high school is over 100%. But we need to keep that number in our mind. Overall, we're out of capacity, right? And our new school, is not keeping up with space with student population growth, right? We don't have money there, and it's just very tough.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wu.
Adding to what Dr. Wu said, the other issue we have is that we have a bus driver shortage, and we would have to then have more buses. We're double busing right now. So that's another challenge that we have, especially if students are able to walk to school. It's best we keep them as walkers, because then for a multitude of reasons, in addition to transportation and ease for parents. But we also have to look that there are economic impacts of these decisions as well when we have very scarce resources.
Thank you, Ms. Delmont-Small. Ms. Rigby, you have some questions on this matter as well?
Yes, thank you. I think I'll just start by saying that this project deconcentrates poverty at the neighborhood level, at the actual site level. It dilutes it. So when those requests for deconcentrating poverty are being made to the council, this is one method of doing that. I think my first questions are probably for some of the enterprise folks. And they're about the LIHTC tax credits from the state and how much the value of the 9% tax credits worth and how much the value of the 4% tax credits worth.
council member just pulling up an actual answer for you. Wanted to make sure that I actually get you the right numbers. So the 9% development, the tax credits are worth $13.8 million to the project. And in the 4%, the tax credits are worth $7.7 million to the project.
Okay, and what percentage of the project would the tax credits cover?
That's an excellent question. I'll need to do some quick math because I don't do great head math. My apologies. On the 9%, it's 47% of the project. And on the 4%, it's going to be significantly less. Let's take a look. It's about 22% of the project.
Okay, and how competitive are they? Do they expire? And what date or time would they expire by?
They are incredibly competitive. On the 4% side, it's actually, those are non-competitive tax credits. So those you can get at any point. The problem with the 4% tax credits is, as you saw, they only generally make up about a quarter of the capital stack. So you have to have lots of angel donors to make that happen. On the 9% side, these are incredibly competitive tax credits. I wish I had the numbers at the ready, but this particular round, you know, we were very lucky. I think there were, you know, somewhere around 45 applicants, and maybe, you know, if I'm going to say something wrong on the record if I try, so I'll stop there. But we had to go in twice to get these competitive tax credits in the first place. With other projects where we have to go at it sometimes 3 and 4 times to actually make the projects work. And we have to do all kinds of things to sort of to make the project's competitive from a scoring standpoint, and one of them is that under this particular qualified allocation plan was that a twinning deal, as it's known, was sort of the ticket to getting projects satisfied, and so one of the reasons why you see us with 2 projects here, a 9% and a 4%, is because we were able to twin them and sort of increase our score for the competitive tax credits. Long-winded answer.
Sorry, I think my cat also interrupted you. Virtual land. And do they expire? Or rather, when do they expire?
Yes, thank you for that. So we have 2021 credits on this project. That means that we have to be placed in service or open to the public, open for leasing as of the end of 2023.
Okay. And without an APFA waiver, would this project be able to move forward?
No.
How does that work in terms of financing and the tax credits and things like that?
So what would happen is that my understanding is that we would end up on the no-go list for school capacity for 4 years, which means that we have to give back our competitive tax credits. So there is no path forward for us if we do not receive this APFO waiver. It is unfortunately the end of the road for the redevelopment of Roslyn Rise.
Thank you. And this might be for Mr. Fitzgerald. I just wanted to double check the numbers because I think, you know, it's important. I thought that I saw on Ms. Young's chart that the capacity of Bryant Woods is 361 students. And then I thought you said that the actual enrollment is 305 students. Did I hear that correctly, or can you correct me, please?
Ms. Rigby, we're going to double check that. Mr. Fitzgerald had to jump away for something emergency, so I'll double check those numbers and get back to you.
Okay, because I think one of my concerns was that the projection was at 368, which is then what closed this project and put it on the APFO chart and needed to go through this process. But the actual is 305. And I'm concerned that we've spent a significant amount of time on something that might not be what reality is, might not be based in reality.
Mr. Rogers, can we verify those numbers for Ms. Rigby?
Yeah, I can, Scott. Thank you. The capacity is 361 at Bryant Woods. And Ms. Rigby, you're correct. The projection for this year was 368 because of withdrawals from COVID and possibly some of the other impacts have been mentioned earlier regarding relocation of families for the start of this process. The current unofficial K-5 enrollment at Bryant Woods is 305.
Okay.
I stress unofficial because, as you know, and probably have heard before,
right,
between now and submittal, there's some rectification that goes on in that number.
No, absolutely. I just, because it was so different, I wanted to make sure that I heard it correctly. Thank you. And then Enterprise, I think I just have last question for Enterprise, which was some of the additional community services that you had mentioned and the wraparound services. If you could talk about them and the supports you provide to the students, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. So this project, this community already benefits from Community Services Foundation support. Enterprise brings them in to provide after-school tutoring programs. Their capacity is limited right now to, I believe, 7, 8, or 9 students. I don't actually have the actual number, but it is limited. But they do work with the family members of those students as well as the students themselves, and they work directly with Bryant Woods Wild Lake Middle teachers as well. So they're tying their after-school programs directly to the curriculum that's being taught to those students that week in class. So some of that is homework help, some of that is additional exercises, field trips, various programming that ties into the curriculum. The program for the past 3 years has demonstrated improvements in those students' grades for 3 years running in math and in reading, which they track as part of a sort of state program. So between 85 and 95% sort of improvements in grades year over year for those student participants. And one of the things that we will be able to do with the redevelopment is to expand the number of seats that program serves. We have a dedicated space in the new building that would just be for this after-school program. And then we would also be bringing in our community impact strategies team, which is our team's resident services. So they will now have a place in the property, and they'll be working to provide all sorts of other programs. Those include health and wellness, mental health. Sometimes we have visiting clinicians. So, for example, we did COVID vaccine clinics on site. That was something facilitated in part by our resident services teams. We do financial well-being and sort of financial education programs, and all sorts of things. We recently took seniors to a play in Pennsylvania. So they sort of work where the need is in a particular community and develop a plan. So we don't have an exact list of programs for this property yet, but we will as soon as we know what the final population looks like.
That's great. My next question was going to be if you're going to be able to expand capacity in the new space. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
I have a question. This would be
I have no idea who is that you, Ms. Cotronio?
This is
Go ahead. All right, please go ahead. Yeah.
What's the breakdown of how many bedrooms this facility will have? Like, is it mostly 1 bedrooms?
That's a great question. So we are adding 95 bedrooms. 55 of those will be 1 bedrooms. Make sure I'm getting this right. 55 will be 1 bedrooms, 24 will be 2 bedrooms, and 16 will be 3 bedrooms. The property currently has 5 4 bedrooms, and we will be replacing those 5 4 bedrooms, but we will not be adding any new 4 bedrooms. So hence the 47 students.
Okay. It is, I mean, some of our apartment communities are really hard to project, and sometimes we're right on, sometimes, and Bryant Woods is one of them. Laurel Woods, Bowman Bridge, Laurel Woods, we just, sometimes we're over, sometimes we're under. So this was a bit shocking, 60 students, but hearing what has been going on in the neighborhood, it kind of explains it a little bit more. But like I said before, Bryant Woods, 100 students in just the last 8 or 9 years growth for a small school, that's pretty significant. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Rigby. It is, sometimes we're just way off and sometimes we're right on. It's just apartments and the turnover is really something we haven't been able to narrow down.
Yeah, that's how, and then I think one thing I just wanted to double check, what was the number of students for elementary school students projected that you said?
If that was directed at me, the addition will be 23 additional elementary school students. I want to clarify one thing. Most of our students that are relocating, I've heard this come up a few times, many of our students that are relocating either within the school district or are staying in the school district. So certainly some of the under-enrollment this year is likely because families have moved out of the Bryant Woods catchment area. But many of the students, prior students that were from the Roslyn Rise community are staying at Roslyn Rise throughout the relocation period.
Good afternoon. This is Oakland Jones. I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Jones, or Dr. Jones, Mr. Youngman is patiently waiting. For some reason, our hand-raising system has completely fallen off.
I just have half and then one last one for Wildlife Village Board, and that's it.
Oh, I thought you said you were done. I do have a follow-up to your question on the adequate, the Apfo charts, right? You're talking about current enrollment, but the exemption that's being sought is from the open and closed school capacity chart. That was the subject of CR 105, the discount.
Right, the over projection.
Okay.
Yeah. That was my question, that the reality doesn't match the projection.
No, wait, Mr. Rigby, I wasn't asking a question. I'm just saying that CR 105 starts at 2024. That's the year of enrollment that's considered when a project is coming through the development process now. So 305 actual or projected or next year or not doesn't matter. What matters for purposes of this Apfo exemption is the chart that was approved by this council in CR 105, the June 2021 Apfo school capacity chart, and that's the one that projects in 2024, September 2024, enrollment of 493 children.
And yes, Chair Walsh, I do understand the chart. My concern is that reality may not be matching it. That was my concern.
So my question for Mr. Rogers, please, is, Mr. Rogers, could you please speak to that 493 number, whether that includes the additional children that would be generated as a part of this project and perhaps others, but how does 493 fit into this project specifically and the projected enrollment for Bryant Woods in 2024?
For the adequate public facilities chart that was adopted this year reflects the school system's enrollment projection from that was developed in February of 2020. And that does follow the redistricting, so it includes all the new boundary was adopted in 2019 for Bryant Woods. It does include the trying to remember. It does include the Roslyn Rise units, and the 493 number was developed. Also, I'll just throw out that it was developed before the onset of COVID-19 and the effects of students withdrawing from the school system that we've seen from that. So there is a subsequent projection in the feasibility study that was presented to the board this year in June, and it does also project that Bryant Woods will remain over the 105% threshold in the test year of 2024-25.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. So I go to Mr. Youngman and then Dr. Jones. When Mr. Youngman is concluded, we will go to you. Thank you, Mr. Youngman.
I imagine there's some people out in the public wondering why we're even having this discussion. We're only entertaining this waiver because this isn't a new apartment complex that a developer came in and pitched to us. This is an existing nonprofit foundation-owned public housing community that's fallen into a state of disrepair. And if allowed to continue, could potentially be in front of a future council to fix with taxpayer dollars. If I represented the school system, I would have been a no on this from day one, because I don't need to worry about the other issues in the county. That unfortunately the county council now finds itself in a position of needing to fix Roslyn Rise without creating other consequences, such as further overcrowding Bryant Woods. Ms. Cotroneo mentioned not wanting to bring new kids into Bryant Woods. That further makes life not good for the kids that are in there. But we have the families that are in Roslyn Rise supporting this project, and I would assume that giving those kids a better place to live is also impactful over their educational experience. So that's what we're trying to sort through for those that are wondering why we're even having this discussion. First question for Enterprise: how many of the existing families in Roslyn work in Howard County? Do you know?
Unfortunately, I don't think that we have that information. We'll try and figure that out. I'm not sure how closely we track that, but we'll try and get you that.
Okay, great. For the school system, assuming the open-close chart's correct, which I'm not sure now, given the last discussion, but even without this incremental student yield from the new units at Roslyn, the region is overcrowded in 2025, and every individual school is overcrowded by 27 or 28. Why is this downtown Columbia elementary school, which has a funding source, not moving forward now? I guess it's a question for either the board or Mr. Washington.
Mr. Youngman, Tim Rogers from school planning again.
Tim, I hate to, we can't hear you very well on that thing. If you lift it up closer to your face.
Okay.
You just hold it up by your mouth. I think you'll be good.
Sorry, yeah.
Much
I always
better,
forget
thanks.
that with sorry, I always forget that with these headphones. In Western Columbia, you're correct with the school capacity chart. And I think the answer to your other question about priorities for elementary schools is that our projections are showing that in the southeast and possibly even in the northwest area where we've just acquired the Turf Valley site, that those elementary projections are showing to be of higher concern and of higher priority in order to address the overcrowding issues that are coming for those areas. So previously, you'll remember that Columbia may have been a higher priority, and what we've seen with recent development in the town center area is lower student yields than previously projected. So that has shifted that priority, and our feasibility study presented in June to the board does outline elementary 43 being in the southeast with the highest elementary seat need projected for that region, the next elementary school being in the northwest with the second highest need projected in that region, and then a future elementary school still considered for the Columbia area.
Well, Tim, I certainly understand that, and please don't think I'm advocating for Turf Valley to go from 43 to 44 and then to 45. But that's all staged out based on the county and the school system's access to capital dollars. The downtown Columbia Elementary School is funded by the downtown Columbia redevelopment. It shouldn't need to compete with those other schools for construction. Now, I know that there's the overhead of physically opening the school, but most of that CIP when it comes to capacity projects is driven by construction dollars, not the operating dollars to operate the school. So I still don't know that I understand why it needs to compete with 43 and 44 to get on the books now for an opening, maybe not by the time Roslyn Rise reopens, but pretty quickly thereafter. that was more of a statement than a question. Maybe the yeah.
Is there somebody else who could?
Well, I think maybe the
I'm
question
just going to say
is,
that's a good question, and is there somebody else who can answer that?
yeah, maybe the
Because
question
that's
is
an important question.
what discussions have been had? Is it something that's being discussed now, or is it just not even on anybody's radar right now?
I'll just quickly say that we reevaluate these needs every year based on projected enrollment. And there are some schools, as previously mentioned, namely Running Brook and Swansfield in this area, that are not shown as closed on the school capacity chart for a few years yet. So need is always a factor in funding of these projects, especially when we're talking about state funding. And I'll defer any other details to Mr. Lubley or Mr. Washington if they'd like.
Right, Mr. Lubley, any other things to add on the capital side, sir, in terms of CIP funding, anything, all those priorities there, sir?
Yes, thank you. I think that's another aspect, and Mr. Youngman, we can definitely take a look at the different local funding sources as you're bringing up the bonds versus the construction funding in the Columbia area. But one of the aspects that Mr. Washington and Mr. Rogers brought up is in trying to take advantage of, or take as much advantage of, the state capital funding as possible. We all know that that is also another limited funding source. If we were to take a look at, say, Bryant Woods or a Columbia school to be 100% locally funded, that's a different avenue that we could go down. However, if we follow our standard process of trying to maximize the local and state funding, that's just another one of the variables that we continue to look at. But we could definitely continue the conversation with regards to the different local funding sources.
And that's a conversation that needs to be happening with Howard Hughes and with county government, you know, that is involved in the administration of the TIF. Is, you know, again, we all understand the CIP and the county and state dollars and how hard it is to make something a priority over something else, because we need a lot of things at once. But this has a different funding source. I just don't understand why we don't just move this school up 3 or 4 years, knowing that regardless of what we do with Roslyn Rise, that region doesn't look good in 5 years. I mean, it's a lot of red there. My next questions are for, I guess, community homes or enterprise. You know, I think it's important for us to take a step back and understand, like, why is this redevelopment needed? I mean, clearly this community exists. There's people living there. It's, you know, presumably safe or whatever. Like, why is this development needed? Why is an increase of units a requirement of redevelopment? Can somebody talk us through that?
This is Dan Keller from Community Homes.
You might need to turn your mic on, yeah.
Probably. Am I on now? All right. So we literally have been at this I've been personally at this for 11 years, trying to get something done to improve this housing. This is affordable housing. It's under a use agreement with HUD. And the issue is, we're either going to do something now to redevelop this, or 10 years from now, instead of being a problem of being a 53-year-old building, now we're at a 63 or 64-year-old building. And Mackenzie mentioned deferred maintenance and other issues there. The things that were built in 1969, me included, are not meant to live until they're 63, 64 without major overhaul, okay? And so that's why we've been trying to do this for quite a while. Now, I'll leave it to Mackenzie and them to talk about specifically why we need the number of units we do. But without those units, there isn't a path forward to just have these same units, number of units, and be able to make any of the financing work. We as a board are actually we're the angel funder here. We're going to put in an additional $5.3 million as a board to make this happen. That's how important we think it is. We think it is for our residents,
And
the
that's community
families.
homes, not enterprise.
What says this is community homes.
Right.
So when you look at the various funding sources, we've got 3.8 million. I'd have to come up with the exact number of what our take-back note was. But we're going to subordinate all that to allow the tax credit to move forward. And then we're going to put another 5.3 million in. And we're going to have to subordinate that in order to make this financing work. It's an incredibly complicated deal in order to get a tax credit redeveloped and built. And that's why the pilot's needed.
Why the additional units? Is that, can you do a LIHTC tax credit now if you're 100% subsidized, or do you have to do the market rate as part of it?
So we did take a look at this, so I guess as a baseline, I want to point out that something that Dan pointed out to some extent, which is these units are really functionally obsolete. We do not feel that we can just go in there and slap a coat of paint on it and really do this community any sort of justice. It has to be full-scale redeveloped. And if we were just kind of back of envelope to knock down the community and rebuild at the same density, we're looking at about a $7 million gap. So that project doesn't work, and that's considering that that's saying that we would get a pilot on that project as well, so sort of keeping the existing pilot in place. The additional market rate units allow us to borrow significantly more in order to fund this project, and that's really the crux of it. The added density allows us to make this redevelopment happen.
And they also allow the development to be more transformative, so we're not looking at a pocket of concentrated households with incomes that are 30-40% of area median income, which is much of what the community there is now. Only by adding a substantial amount of units are you really able to introduce mixed income housing that works, that makes market rate households comfortable, and that has an impact that the community at large feels, as well as the residents living in the property.
You said something impactful a couple minutes ago of 1969, and it doesn't seem like that long ago, but we have townhouse communities and apartment communities all over Howard County that were built in 1969 that don't need to be bulldozed. Like, what happened here is it the people that live there are not taking care of it? Is it the company that owned it didn't maintain it? Is it a combination of a bunch of things?
Well, I think the most important one is to go back and look at how they built affordable housing in the late 60s. And they built them, you're comparing them to market rate where, I don't know, Ryland Homes, whoever, is looking to build these homes that will last forever. Affordable housing wasn't done that way, and it specifically wasn't done that way based on size of unit, amenities for units. We're talking about small townhouses that don't have washer and dryer, are just totally different from where we are now in an apartment market, okay? So yes, there are probably properties that were built as market rate. It's different materials, it's different other things. It's not a matter of not maintaining the units or not doing it. You can go back and look at the HUD things, the REACT scores are all there. It really is just the fact that when they built these properties, they were not meant to be 100-year properties.
And my last question was, what is everybody investing? But I think you covered that, and we have a sources and uses in the book. So I'll pass on that. I'm done, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The houses that are being built now, they are being built forever, or do they also have a 40-year estimated lifespan or a 60-year? What are we proposing to build in the new Roslyn Rise complex?
I would assume that these are forever homes. I will say that Enterprise has been around for, what are we at, like 32 years now, and certainly all of our products are still going strong. We haven't reached that, 100, 150 year mark, so we haven't fully vetted our projects, but that's certainly the idea that these would be, 100 or forever homes.
Okay, good, thank you. Dr. Jones?
Yes, thank you. So I had a follow-up question earlier. It somewhat got answered. My question was about number of students at the elementary school level, since we were talking about the elementary school, and I believe the answer was 23 students. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Would you happen to know, and probably not, but would you happen to know if there's a breakdown in the projections per grade, or do you just usually average that out? So, like, for instance, if it's K through 6 or K through 5, that's 6 grades, would you say on average it's about 3 to 4 students? Or would you happen to know what the projection is per grade?
The projection is not done by grade, so yeah, I think your estimates, 2, 3, 4 students per grade maximum is what we've been assuming.
Okay. So if there's generally like 2 classes, sometimes 3 per grade, so we may be talking about 1 student per class. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct, but if I understand the student sort of enrollment numbers correctly, it might not even be that many per classroom because of the number of homerooms per grade.
Oh, okay, right. Given Mr. Rigby's comment earlier. Okay, so thank you for that. I just wanted to, I heard percentages earlier, 136%, and I heard some things earlier. I just wanted to try to get it down to the actual number of bodies. So that was the first thing. The second thing I was curious about, and I believe someone had a question earlier, and forgive me if I missed the beginning of the meeting, so forgive me if this has already been answered. But I'm under the impression that the Wild Lake Village Board gave thoughts or had an assessment of the project or gave their thoughts or feelings. Would you happen to know what they are? Could anyone speak to what that was?
I can speak to what we've heard from the Wild Lake Village Board. We have met with them several times throughout this process, 4 to 5 times, I think, between the board itself and the Resident Architecture Committee. They did, I believe you're alluding to their statement of testimony in support of our project. They did write in support, and they voted in support at a meeting a few weeks ago. We have, throughout that process, not heard any concern about schools. In fact, we've heard primarily, we have heard 2 comments about farms rates, but we, by and large, have received a tremendous amount of support from the community throughout the full public meeting process. That also includes planning board meetings related to our site development plan process. So as far as we have been made aware, residents of Wild Lake Village are excited about this.
Could I answer that question, please? This is Tracy Manning, the Wild Lake Village Board.
Sure, please go ahead, Ms. Manning.
Thank you. We did consider this project very, very carefully and had lots of tough questions, just as you are. In the end, we came down to the fact that the overall benefits of this project could be so transformative in our village that it seemed worth the risk of 1 or 2 extra children in a class. We think that it'll improve the life for the residents there, and the current residents are very much in support of it. The neighbors are supportive of it. The Wild Lake Village Center merchants are very supportive of it. We believe that it will be a very, very positive experience. The energy saving kinds of things and the environmental care that's been taken with this project, way beyond a lot of other ones in the area. And the fact that it should be an overall positive for the not only the school district, but for the atmosphere, the climate, the health of Wild Lake Village Center. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right. Getting back to what I think is at issue before this council, right? I don't think the pilot, I'm looking at my colleagues. I don't think the pilot is the issue for us. and the school board, and that's what brought so many of the school board here today and members of the administration at the Howard County Public School System, but it is in fact this exemption from Apfo. Ms. Catronio, I think you had your hand raised. I'm gonna let you have the last word on this, and then we will move to Therese.
It is true, there is capacity at Swansfield and at Running Brook, and both schools have been recently renovated. So they've got the core facilities can handle increased capacity, the cafeteria, that sort of thing. Because Bryant Woods, the cafeteria, it's difficult because there's a lot of kids getting free and reduced meals and the lines are really long and that sort of thing because the cafeteria can't even handle it. But to speak to Mr. Youngman, what he was talking about, we kind of took the pedal off with the downtown Columbia because the yields from the downtown, the apartment buildings, we were not getting a lot of students. And so it sort of shifted our focus. But that being said, the properties that we do have are all west. From what I remember, they're not located right there. Unfortunately, they're like, I think over by oh my gosh, I'm losing the not Cedar Lane, but over by the hospital. So they're not right there. So
Hickory Ridge.
Hickory Ridge, thank you.
It's where I live.
Yeah, they're all sort of over there near the Hammond area, the Laurel Hammond area. So they're not right there. So it would not be that easy to relieve that area. But that being said, we do have a little bit of capacity surrounding us with the next redistricting when we do high school 13. I think we definitely have some room to fix some issues that we created. And that Bryant Woods is one of them. So I just wanted to speak to that, but I agree that we should start looking at that at a downtown site if this is going to be the beginning of future projects. I wanted to ask Mr. Rogers real quick, when you said you included Roslyn Rise, did you include the increased density from this project in the projections or just the Roslyn Rise as it stands today?
We get housing projection from the county every year in December from DPZ, and you know those numbers are the units from Roslyn Rise would have been lumped in with any other projected units from that year for that attendance area.
So you didn't include, so it doesn't count like this project.
So I think it would have included the net increase.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Young, and then for we're done.
Okay, thanks. I just have one more question, and it's to the school district. Let's assume that this is true, that in 3 years, with the addition of these students at Roslyn Rise, that Bryant Woods Elementary School is at 136.6% capacity as it is projected right now, and that all 6 of the trailers that are at Bryant Woods right now continue to reside there. So there's literally no more room at Bryant Woods. None. 0. What happens? Is the school board committed in such a situation to redistrict those kids or some kids who are going into Bryant Woods right now? I think it's my number one concern. Where do those kids go? There's no physical room in a school and no place to put any more trailers than are already located there. What happens? Anybody from the school district, school board members,
Mr. Washington, is that
anyone?
Yeah, thanks. I'll take this one. So policy 6010 lists some triggers that the board evaluates and considers each year in proposing redistricting.
Can you
So one of
speak
those
into your
sorry,
microphone a little bit more closely again, Mr. Rogers? Thank you.
I apologize. Yeah, policy 6010 lists schools outside of target utilization as a trigger for considering boundary adjustments. And so seeing this, the school being outside of our target utilization range of 90 to 110% would trigger the board to consider reviewing the boundaries for that school and possibly beginning the redistricting process to provide that relief. But I think the summary answer is seeing this in the projections would trigger the board to consider action, and one of those actions would probably be redistricting in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. All right, thanks, Ms. Young. Thank you all who have joined us for this conversation on the CR 144 and 145. With that, we will move on to the next two agenda.